Hi there. Welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. We continue Book 7 of the Politics, starting today at looking at 14, where now went from the best regime to the question of education of the best regime, in that sense, of the question of education. So let's turn to chapter 14 right here. Since every political community is constituted of rulers and ruled, this must be investigated. If the rulers and the ruled should be different or the same throughout life. For it is clear that education too will have to follow in accordance with this distinction. So the question is, what's going on here? Ruler and ruled, but should the rulers and ruled be the same always? Or should what? They should be the same or different? Should they be the same or different? Or the same throughout life? And if this is the case, then the education will reflect on this. Education, in other words, what is education is always going to be relevant to the kind of regime you have. Education is always like relevant. How every regime will educate will be specific towards that regime. And therefore, the question of this question about how this said rule and ruled, this needs to be investigated. The question is what? That should the rulers will be different or the same throughout life? So why? Because it was clear that education too will have to follow in accordance with this distinction. Now, if the ones were as different from the other as we believe the gods and heroes different from human beings, much exceeding them in the place in the first place of the body and then the soul, so that the preeminence of rulers is indisputable and evident to the ruled. It is clear that it would always be better for the same persons to rule and the same ones to be ruled all at once. So therefore, in other words, if the difference between ruler and ruled is so obvious, right, that there's a preeminence both of body and soul, then it would be best that the rulers, the same people rule and the same people be ruled. This is like the master and slave, natural master and natural slave. But they have to be what? It is clear to everyone. It is clear that it would always be better for the same person to rule. In other words, it is indisputable and evident to the ruled. To the ruled. In other words, the ruled themselves see that these people are so better. They're like gods and heroes. They're better, and that since they're better, we should simply. It's our benefit that they rule. Okay, this is the natural master. This is the natural ruler. The natural slave is the one who realized this. The natural master is the one who's so good and the virtue is so preeminent that they do it, right? But since this is not easy to assume, there being none so different from the ruled as Sisek says the kings of India are, it is evident that for many reasons it is necessary for all of the similar fashion to share in ruling and being ruled in turn. Now, 72, we're on this. 72 is Sisek of Concordia, geographical writer in the late 6th century, went to India, and they said that Indian kings are so big and different. That they're clearly different, right? This idea, this writer, Sislax, is a travel writer. Now, Aristotle here is pointing to Sisax's account of India, where the idea of the kings of there are distinct and different kind. Now, but Aristotle seems to suggest that no, but in most cases this is not the case. What? That it's not clear that they are. It is not so evident these people are so great, and the people who are going to be ruled don't necessarily see them as great, and because of this, right? It is evident that for many reasons it's necessary for all in a similar fashion to share in rule and being ruled in turn. For equality is the same thing as, okay, this is he adds this, 73, accepting Turet supplement to Dakai. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. For equality is the same thing as justice, he says, right? I don't think you need to do that, but it's the same thing. For persons who are similar. Same thing for persons who are similar. And it is difficult for a regime to last if its constitution in other words, it's how it's structured is contrary to justice. In other words, and I think this is not the word constitution is not politeia here. It is that if it's order, I think maybe it is constitution. But if it's order, if it's being, how it's built, how it's instituted, is contrary to justice. In other words, justice equals if everyone is the same or similar. There's no vast inequality. But in other words, this means by here the distinction must be standard deviations, not just slight differences, but the differences must be so different that one would see them and admit that they are better. If that doesn't exist, if people do not see that these people are simply better, then it's better to have that people are mostly the same. See, this is the thing. Equality here does not mean equality means identical or sameness. The equality here means relative equality. That there's not a clear preeminent difference. That this difference demands obedience or submission. Okay, that it's a difference in kind, and their kind is better than you. Okay, this idea that they are better, they're like gods. Okay, or they're like heroes. The metaphor that he gave earlier, right? If that's not the case, if you don't see them as that preeminent per se, so simply preeminent, so simply better, then it's not going to be. It's going to be most people are thinking, and if that's the case, if in other words, if people are similar, it's difficult for a regime to last if the regime is, if justice is that similar people should have equality, still people should be treated the same, right? That does not just mean that they should obey, that these people should rule and these people should obey, but rather it's not that clear. No, these people do not think they should obey. That they basically see that they're similar, or not subordinated. Then what happens? Then there should be, in other words, they should be treated the same. They should have this kind, and it would be contrary to justice to do so. To establish that this person ruled, they don't believe this. In other words, this is this idea here. For the ruled citizens, the ruled. Let's say the ruled. For the ruled will have. I think I want to. He says citizens here. I think in serfs, right? I think that's the thing. The ruled will have with them all those serfs in the countryside who want to subvert it, and it is impossible that those who are in the governing body, the plutuma, will be numerous enough to be stronger than all of these. So notice this: for the ruled, those who ruled, those who are people who are going to be governed and not rulers, right? The ruled will have all those in the countryside. Now he says the serfs, right? In this specific regime, or slaves, the serfs, those in the countryside. The rulers will have all those in the countryside, who are the ruled will have all those in the countryside. And remember, that's the thing is, I think we have to go back to this understanding of this regime, that the serfs are ruled. Okay, so there's not only just citizen. I think he's wrong here by bracketing citizen. I think that's a wrong addition here. And serfs are not only serfs. These people, the ruled, are not the serfs. Not the serfs are also those ruled. So, including them, all those in the countryside who want to subvert it, to subvert the rule. It is impossible for those in the governing body, the Tuma, will be numerous enough to be stronger than all of these. Nevertheless, the rulers, the Putuma, that means the ruling body, right? The governing body, the ruling body, the ruling part of the city, right? Nevertheless, the rulers should differ from the ruled is indisputable. In other words, it is indisputable that the rulers should differ from the ruled. But if they don't perceive themselves different from the ruled, okay, right? How this is to be the case and how they will take part in ruling and being ruled in turn then should be investigated by the legislature. So therefore, this is the question. This chapter leads us to a question of the ruled and ruled. ruler and ruled. Now, we admit that there must be those who rule must differ somehow. But the question is there a difference by nature, or is this merely convention? Is this rule, right? Now let's continue here. This was spoken of earlier, back in all the way in one about the slave by book chapter one, right? All the way back in chapter one, and also again in book three. Nature has provided a distinction by making that which is the same by type have younger and older element, of which it is proper for the former to be ruled and the latter to rule. So therefore, but again, this takes us to the all the way to book one, chapter two. The idea of the elder and the younger, the elder and the younger. The elder should rule the younger, right? This is the parent should rule the child. No one chef said being ruled on the basis of age, in other words, or considers himself superior, particularly when he's going to recover his contribution when he attains the age to come. In other words, this is 74. This is kind of erenos, the gift or loan, which is repayment in some form of anticipation. In other words, their child will help them, right? In other words, that he helps their child, a parent helps their child, and likewise, there's going to be kind of this idea that as they get older, the child will help their parent, right? In other words, particularly when he is going to recover his contribution when he attains an age to come, right? This is that children, this kind of reciprocity of responsibility, right? Reciprocity, and that the one generation helps the younger, and therefore they hope that they will be helped by this way. In one sense, therefore, one must be assert that the same person. It must be asserted that the same persons rule and are ruled, but in another sense, different persons. So, in other words, that this the idea, this parent and child, elder, younger, that there are those, but actually they are different person over time. There are still this relation, but what the same person's parents rule over child, but it's going to be actuality. At times, these will become these, and new ones will come in. Right? That's the new children will come in. New ones will be ruled, and that these will take care of the older ones. Right? So therefore, this is why they differ in that degree. But in another sense, it's different. So education too must necessarily be the same in a sense, and in another sense, different, right? So therefore, they must understand that the education must be different. They must be the same in that we understand that this is the structure of how it will happen. But we need to have an education, one for the young and one for the old rulers, right? So it is asserted one who is going to rule beautifully, should have been ruled, should first have been ruled. In other words, if you're going to be a ruler, you should be ruled. Now, 75, let's look at the 75 here. Both the structure of the sentence T is unanswered, and abruptly abandoned of the just introduced introduced subject of the education suggests that the subject may be dropped from text. Right? Something has been missing. He argues. I'm not so sure it does. I think there is this. So it might be sir, the one who is going to rule finally should have first ruled. Now, rule, as was said in our first discourses, again, 76, I think this is book 3, chapter 4, the different types of rule, right, that he talked about, is on the one hand for the sake of the ruler, and on the other hand for the sake of the ruled, right? There's two possible ways. Now, I think this is true. The question of who's ruling. Rule should be either for the sake of the ruler or for the sake of the ruled, right? But Aristotle also says that, wait a minute, there's also, how about both? Common rule, common benefit. For the sake means who's going to benefit, right? Is the benefit going to be the ruler or the ruled? This leads us to despotism, where mastery or despotic despotism mastery, that the ruler is being benefited, and the parental care is, or kingly rule, the ruled is going to be benefited. But political rule, like economic rule, is going to be one of both ruler and ruled are going to benefit, right? This political rule is one that ruler and ruled, there's a mutual advantage, common advantage, right? That's what the distinction is, not between those who are the ruler. Aristotle's dichotomy of the one, the few, the many is not between. He said he does is not between the ruler. Yes, the defective is when the ruler is benefiting solely. It is not that unlike Plato, the argument is not the analogy from the arts where the ruled must benefit, right? The just is not from the arts where the ruled must benefit. The just form is when there's mutual benefit between ruler and ruled. So thus for this of the sorts of rule we have asserted, the former to be characteristic of a master. In other words, that is ruled for the benefit of, that is, in other words, for the sake of the ruler. That's of a master, despotes, right? And of the latter being before a free people, right? This is 77. A Lucana at this point of the text has been suspected by some people, and this is that line. Now, certain commands differ not by tasks involved. In other words, certain commands or these orderings, things, differ not in terms of the task involved, but by the end for the sake of which they're carried out. So, certain commands is not the means. The means you're doing. How is it being done? But rather, what is the end that is being carried out? What is going to be done? Right. Hence, it is noble, beautiful, for the free among the young to serve in many of the tasks that are held to be characteristic of servants. So it's noble of the free to do things of the servants, of people who are servant. Right? The idea of it's not slaves, not per se slave, is delos, but therefore those who those who are ruled, those are being ruled. For with a view to what is noble and not and what not noble, or what is beautiful, another kolos or a kolos. In other words, what is with the view towards the beautiful, the noble, and what is beautiful, the not beautiful or not noble, the ignoble, right? Action, in other words, for with a view to what is noble and not and what and what's not and what is not noble actions. So noble and what not noble actions do not differ so much in themselves as in their ends. In other words, in other words, this, these people they do not differ in themselves as in they do not so much differ themselves as in their ends, and that for the sake of which they are performed. So why are they being performed? They're being performed for noble ends, versus being performed to ignoble ends or not noble ends. What is the purpose? Hence, it's noble for the young to do what is the why are they doing the servant's task? Well, to learn how to be. They learn self-restraint, self-discipline. This is being done to teach them self-growth and discipline, right? You make them do tasks and chores, and execute certain chores, or duties that servants would do, to basically what, to discipline them, to make their natures habituate them that their natures are beautiful, noble, not to make them do chores for chores' sake, or to make them do services that they're made slavish or submissive. Okay. The actions do not differ so much in themselves as their ends, and for the sake of which they are performed. Since we assert that the virtue or the excellence of the citizen and the ruler is the same as that of the good man, the same person must be ruled first and ruler later. The legislature would have to make it his affair to determine how men can become good, and through what pursuits and what end is which and what end is the of end of the best life is. What the end of the best life is. What is the goal? What is the purpose of the best life is? Okay, so therefore, how are they being made good, and what pursuits? Through what pursuits, and what end? What is the end of the best life? What is the end of the best life in that sense? This is what the legislature should focus on in that sense. So, hence, this is that famous line 78, which is what it's again book 3, chapters 4 and 5. That from a discussion of the good man, the good citizen, right? Here, the good man, the good citizen, that we assert that the virtue of the citizen and the ruler is the same as the good man. The good man is the good citizen. And the same person must be, therefore, the same person must be first ruled and then ruler. And then the legislature should now, because of this, the legislature needs to know how can people become good, agathos, and through what pursuits, and what the end of the best life is. But what is the goal? What is purpose? Happiness, right? What is it? The soul is divided in two parts, of which the one has reason itself, and the other does not have it in itself, but is capable of obeying reason. That's again. So again, this says there's two souls, right? The two parts. The first part is the rational part, right? That it does have reason, and the other one is doesn't. It's the vegetative or the animal part, which is not does not have reason in itself, but it can obey reason. To these belong, we assert, the virtues in accordance to which man is spoken of, as in some sense good, right? This is the 79. This is Nicomachean ethics. This is the Hodia. This is the character, question of character. And this is habit, right? In other words, if the rational part can be achieved, the virtue, and then what happens is that the animative part, the animal part, is what it can be guided by, it can obey reason, right? Which, as to which of these the end is more to be founded in, what must be said is not clear to those who distinguish in the way we assert should be done. In other words, as to which of these ends is more to be found in, what must be said is not unclear to those who distinguish in the ways we assert should be done. In other words, what is he saying here? That in other words, we should do these things, that we have to understand that the virtue is this way. What is the two things, and that the one who should know, we should know what in other words, the ones who's rational should seek what is virtuous, right? And the one who's who obey should be guided by the virtues, right? Um, um, they should which of these ends is more to be found in, right? But this is not unclear who understand this way. The worse is always for the sake of the better. Words. This is evident in a similar way both to what accords with art and what accords with nature. And the element having reason is better. So the worst is for the sake of the, in other words, he says, the worst is always for the sake, the lesser is always for the sake of the one that's not as strong should be for the sake of the better one, right? For the sake of the better. This is evident in the similar way both what accords with art and accords with nature. So art, convention, techne, craft, techne and nature both agree on this, right? The techne in art, the art of this, understands that the nature, the better is, the worse is always subordinated to the better in that sense. Um, this is divided in this is divided in two. This is divided in two in the manner to which we accustom to distinguish. There is reason. There is reason of the active sort in one on the one hand, and reason of the studying sort on the other. Again, this is the distinction between praxis and theory and praxis, right? Theoria, theoretical, praxis, action, right? Of action. This is book 6 of the Nicomachean Ethics, right? The discussion that follows that, the whole practical virtues and the idea of theoretical, the difference between the theoretical ration, the reason, the logos that deals with praxis, which is techne and prudence, and the logos that deals with theoria, which is episteme, nous, which deals with first principles, and sophia, wisdom, the whole, right? It is clear, therefore, that this part of the soul must also be divided in the same fashion. Okay, so therefore, this idea of the soul is divided between the part that is theoretical and the part that is practical, right? That therefore, the part that is reason, pure reason, and that is pure, that is capable of reason, right? We shall say, and we shall say that actions stand in comparable relationship. Those belong to that part which is better by nature, are more choice-worthy than those who are capable of achieving either all of them or those belonging to the two lower parts. For this is what is the most choice-worthy for each individual always, to obtain the highest thing possible for him. So therefore, this is, in other words, this idea. There's two parts. There is what is the there is the soul and the body, right? The soul and the body, and the soul is divided itself into the that is which that is rational, the high theoretical, and that is and the life of theory, thought, pure thought, contemplation, ideas, the mind, and then those logos that deal with the body, the rational. There's this action, making, doing, and acting and doing, right? Prudence and techne. And again, techne is what the logos, the truing, the rational, the use of reason that deals with making things, poesis, doing, making, doing it right, doing it beautifully. Prudence is the dealing with acting, how we act in the world, how we do things, how we live, right? So we have this situation, right? Those as we said, the action stands in competitive relation. Those belonging to that part which is better by nature are more choice worthy than for those who are capable of achieving either all of them or those belonging to the two lower parts. There was even the lower part that should try to achieve the higher thing was better. For this is what is most choice worthy for each individual always, the best, right? To obtain the highest thing possible for them. So, what is the best possible? If the best possible is in being able to enjoy the life of complete compatible reasoning, but if they don't have that high, their mind isn't that, then obeying, doing what is in order to live the amount of reason that allows them to obey reason, that they're able to at least enjoy, get some benefit, get participate in what is best. Okay. Um, Life as a whole is divided into occupations and leisure. In other words, and leisure, occupations and leisure, and war and peace. So life as a whole is divided too, right, into occupations and leisure, and war and peace, and of matters involving action, praxis, and some that are directed towards necessary and useful things, and others towards beautiful things. The kalos, ta, takala, takala, takalos, takalo, takala, tak, tak, I think the beautiful things, the noble things, and the noble or beautiful things, right? These are, in other words, they're necessary things, actions that are necessary, and then actions that are beautiful. It's the actions are necessary. Maybe there's no choice. That some of the necessity often lacks choice. But then the things of choice, we choose the most beautiful, the most noble, right? Choice is the realm where you can achieve nobility, or it's opposite, right? Necessity is what must be done. Okay, So therefore, the choice worthy is that of the highest things, right? Um, Useful things can be also the useful things use, right? Are directed towards the necessary and useful things. So life of action deals, in other words, the matters involving actions. Some are directed towards the necessary, and others to the useful. But others are towards the noble. So useful and the noble. There's a distinction here. Useful that are able to use, and the noble and beautiful. The beautiful, that's the highest. Concerning these things, there must of necessity be the same choice as in the case of the parts of the soul and their actions. So what is he saying here? In other words, concerning these things, these divides, right? Occupation should not be for the sake of occupation, but occupation should be for the sake of living well. Living well, leisure. Leisure should not be for leisure's sake, but also to be better, right? That we make ourselves better. War for the sake of peace. Peace for the sake of what is best, what is good, right? Concerning these things, there must necessarily be the same choice regarding the parts. War must be for the sake of peace. Occupation for the sake of leisure. The necessary and useful for the things for the sake of the noble things, the beautiful things. The political ruler must legislate, therefore, looking to all these things in the case both of the parts of the soul and their actions. So, therefore, the souls must always be higher for the better part. The souls, in other words, what is best? The rational over this, the one that's fully enjoying capable reasoning, the one that engages in reason versus the one that can only obey reason. This must be for the sake of that. That therefore it must obey reason. So the bodily part must obey the soul, the rational part. Okay, and therefore the lower should, in other words, the war should be for the sake of peace, occupation for the sake of leisure, and the necessary and useful to the sake of the beautiful things. The political rule must legislate, looking to all these things in both cases of the parts of the soul and their actions, but particular to the things that are better, and the ends of things. What is the reason for the doing it? They should pay attention to the ends and particularly the things that are better, the better things, the higher things, the most noble and the most beautiful things. Um, and he must do so in the same manner and connection with the ways of life and the divisions among activities. Now the divisions, this is 81. He's saying that the choices instead of choices. With the choices among, I don't know. I would even say the ways of life and the choices among activities, the different choices that we have to have. Divisions also among activities. For one should be capable of being occupied and going to war, but one should rather remain at peace and be at leisure. So one should be capable of doing war, but peace is better than war. And leisure is occupied is necessary if it's needed, necessary, but it should not be the end. Occupation, leisure should be the end, and one should act to achieve necessary and useful things. One should act to achieve necessary and useful things, but noble things more so. So okay, it's good. It's necessary and useful things. Okay, you need to get them. It's good, but the noble things are the ones are better, and you should seek. Now you shouldn't. If the choice is one at the expense of the other, that's the problem usually. But sometimes you first do these, then to achieve those. You achieve these to achieve those. In other words, you get these things in order to get these things, right? So it is a view towards these aims that must be educated in other words, must be educated when still children. In other words, teaching them these things, these aims, as well as during in other ages that require education. So it's not only, in other words, this what he's saying here, that you should understand what the noble things are. How to achieve the useful, necessary things. Know what they are. Know what is the useful, what is necessary. Know that the useful and necessary are you need them, but they're not ends in themselves. They're means to in order to end the most beautiful things, the noble things. And therefore you have to know what the noble is. You have to know what the noble versus what is the ignoble. What is the useful versus in other words, the necessary versus the unnecessary. The the useful versus the not useful. The noble and beautiful versus the not beautiful and the not the akalos. Okay, or the ugly, right? Not ugly, but the shit, ugly, the opposite of kalos. And this is the education of not only when they're children, but also in the other ages, right? Those of the Greeks who are at present held to be best governed, and the legislatures who established those regimes that evidently did not organize the things pertaining to the regime with a view to the best ends. In other words, the Spartans and the Spartans, right? The Spartan regime and many of them, right? These regimes that are presently held to be best governed, and the legislatures who established those regimes did not organize these things pertaining to the regime with a view to the best end, or the laws and education with a view to all the virtues, but inclined them in a crude fashion towards those which are held to be useful and more aggrandizing sort. In other words, the idea is war. The focus on war. The Spartan, he's not talking about this. They took what is it? They did what? They didn't take the best and the highest. They took something the more useful. The useful. They took the regime with the best end. They did not organize it to the best end, or the laws or education with a view to the virtues, but incline in a crude fashion towards which are held to be useful and of a more aggrandizing sort. Certain persons later in the spirit similar to those have expressed the same opinion. And I think that's Plato, right? This maybe that's a bit jibe at Plato and others. In praising the regime of the Spartan, they admire the aim of the legislature because he legislated everything with a view to domination or war, views which are readily refutable on the basis of reason and have now been refuted by facts. In other words, this Peloponnesian War and what's happened with the Spartans who have been defeated by the Thebans. Okay, and now even in other words that in other words that those who emphasize war and the virtues of war, the lower virtues of the Spartan virtues, are not necessarily the best in that sense, right? For just as most human beings envy mastery over many persons because it provides much equipment in things of fortune, so Thibron and each of the others who write about their regime evidently admire the Spartan legislator because they ruled over many persons as a result of having trained themselves with a view of dangers. So what's interesting here is what this is the this is 82. Apart from Theron and others who know nothing is known, Aristotle may have had in mind Xenophon's extract thesis on the Spartan regime, but he appears to indicate that such treaties were numerous. In other words, Spartan on this, and maybe even Plato in his Republic on the Spartan. That's also kind of like I think that's, in other words, they envy what mastery over persons because it provides them equipment over fortune, right? And Theron and others that admire the Spartan legislation because they ruled over many persons, right? They train themselves. Yet since, yet, and yet since now at least ruling an empire, people others, is no longer available to Spartans, it clearly follows that they are not happy and that their legislature was not a good one. In other words, the Spartans got defeated by the Thebans, right? And they were finally defeated and destroyed. and diminished, and that therefore the Spartans were not no longer happy anymore because they were defeated, and the Thebans freed the Helots, right, and now they were miserable. But now 83, this is the weird thing. This reading with Estai with Congreve rather than further, right? But further, this is ridiculous. That they should have lost the chance for living beautifully, even while abiding by his laws, and in the absence of any impediment to putting the laws into practice. In other words, just because they're no longer, in other words, he said this is ridiculous. That they should have lost the chance of living beautifully, nobly, while even abiding by his laws, and in absence of any impediment to putting his laws into practice. Nor do they have a correct conception concerning the sort of rule that the legislature should be seen to honor. In other words, that is they view. In other words, what is that? What they view of mastery. There is the Spartans, and those who champion the Spartans tend to view rule as not rule but mastery. This is an attack on those who conflate mastery with politics. Aristotle here is once again repeating what he asserted in Book 1, that mastery, despotes, and politicae, or politicos, a political ruler, are not the same type of thing. Political rule and mastery are not the same type of rule. One is rule over free people, and one is not rule over the unfree. In other words, nor do they have a correct assumption of the sort of rule that is legislated should be seen to honor, right? Rule over free persons is nobler and accompanied to the greatest extent by virtue than ruling in a spirit of a despotes, master. In other words, this is more noble. Being a master is not noble. Ruling over slaves is not beautiful. Ruling over slaves may be necessary, but it's not beautiful. Ruling over free people in a beautiful way, in a way, that is beautiful. Ruling over free people, and free people do so with voluntary versus coercion, and ruling that benefits them, or these that all share in the benefit, right? This is whereas rule like a master, where it benefits only the ruler, this is not noble. This is ignoble, right? Um, um, Further, it is not on this account that one should consider the city happy and praise the legislature. In other words, that they have rule over others, rule over people. In other words, further, it is not on this account of what ruling over others, right? Like a master, uh, 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 that one should consider the city happy and praise together. That he trained it to conquer for the purpose of ruling those nearby, the Spartans, to rule the Helots, right? These things involve great harm. In other words, and given what he says right now here, this rejects, would suggest that his recommendation earlier is correct about the rule of having the citizens be treated like the Spartans. He's just undermined his own account of what should happen in the regime we should pray for. See the contradiction there that says earlier we talked about the city should be that the farmer should be serfs, right, like the Helots or the Cretians, right? No, that's a great harm. He at this passage right here he repeats the message that he advances earlier in Book 3 about it's not right to deprive the many of the prerogatives of the city and this being citizens. You may not make them be the highest offices, but they should have some say in the regime. To 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 exclude them from the regime is a great harm. So, in other words, to train them to conquer and to purpose of ruling those as masters, subservient, this is a great harm. For it is clear that any citizen who is capable of doing so must attempt to pursue the capacity to rule his own city, and everything the Spartan accused of their king their king Parasus of, and even though he is held so great a prerogative, even though he held so great a prerogative. Now, 84, presumably Pursuo is attempted to become tyrant of Sparta after the Persian War, though he was never technically king. And some identified it with a Pernuses who was king during the Peloponnesian War. Right? This idea that he sought to rule over. This is something ignoble, right? There is indeed nothing in such arrangements and laws that is either political, beneficial, or true. In other words, those who seek to rule people despotically, those who are going to read them as to impose this is the tyrant, right? This is the tyrant. This is someone who's going to rule them. They're going to rule them like they're servants. They're not free. They're not free. They're slaves. This is not. This is what. This is something indeed that is in such an argument. Nothing in such an arrangement and such laws that is either political, beneficial, or true. The same things are, in other words, the same things are best for men both privately and in common. And the legislature should implant those in the soul of the human beings. In other words, make sure that this is in other words, what is good is not only good individually, but it's also in common. So is it good for you to be ruled and lose your freedom? No. Be treated like slave. If you're not a slave, if you're everyone is the same and is not the and but if there was the difference, you would admit it and you'd volunteer to do it. But since you're not, you don't agree, you don't see the difference that they're better. It's not clear to you that they are simply better and they know more and they're better for you and they can rule you better than you can rule yourselves. Therefore, in this situation, it should be the situation of those whom you've agreed to rule over you should rule over you. Right? This is this. There's this. This is why, even though Aristotle does not speak of government by consent, there is this implied the idea that since rule that mere involuntary rule is the rule of slaves, and free people are ruled voluntarily. This is kind of an implicit argument for the concept of consent, right? Should implant and this is what, and that legislation should implant these in the souls of human beings. The idea that what is best for men, what is best for men, what is really best for men. Well, this is what they should implant. Training in the matter of, in other words, trainings in the matter of war should be practiced not for the sake of reducing to slavery those who do not merit it, but in the first place, in order that they themselves will not become slaves to others. And next, so that they may seek leadership for the sake of benefiting the ruled, not for the sake of mastery over everyone. And third, to be masters over those who merit being slaves. And who are the merit being slaves? The unjust, the dangerous, the barbaric, those who are going to be destructive to the community. Not, in other words, this is not the idea that they're going to be masters because of this. So there's the three first persons. Why do you learn war? War, so one, that you will not become slaves to others. You don't become slaves. In other words, you should be what? You should only know war. Why? So you don't become slaves. Next, that you seek leadership. 85. This is homogeneia. So coalition for the sake of benefiting the cities you're doing, not to enslave, not for the sake of mastery over everyone. In other words, if you're gonna engage in leadership is either for care, benefit, or hegemonia is either going to be care, benefiting, or despotic. Master, not mastery. Mastery benefits what? Master always benefits the ruled. So hegemony that becomes masterly is bad. It is harmful. Harmful to be who's ruled and harmful to the rulers. It's unstable. Therefore, you what if you're going to benefit? You rule over others, your leaders, not for your own, merely own benefit, but for their benefit as well. Right? This is the idea. And third, the third category is what? To be masters over those who merit being slaves. Who should now? This is the problem. Who merit slavery? The base, those who are what? Unjust, those who are dangerous, those who are destructive, those who are vicious, those who are going to be, and you don't, this is not going to. You're going to have to control them so that they don't harm the others. That the legislature should give serious attention to arranging that legislation, in particular with connection with the matters relating to war, in other words, is for the sake of being at leisure and of peace, is testified by the events as well as arguments. The purpose of war is not war, 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 but that you're able to have peace and leisure. You learn war, as he says, one, so that you're not slave, you're not enslaved. Two, you're able to lead. You got to lead if you're going to engage in leadership of others for their benefit. And third, to enslave those who merit. In other words, to master those who are those who merit being slaves, and who are that? The unjust, right? And you need to have what? Understand that this. So therefore, the legislature should give serious attention to instead to arranging the legislation, right? Attention to arranging legislation, and particularly that concerning with matters of war, is to be for the sake of leisure and of peace. This is testified by most cities of this sort preserve themselves when at war. The cities who do this for the sake, I'm going to war, why? To secure peace. What is the peace? That everyone is benefiting. If I'm doing it for I'm benefiting at your expense, then that's not going to last long. People resent that. That's what when the Athenians started to, their rules tended to be too self-serving. This is when the Athenian cities were broke away from them. Right? Most cities are of this sort preserve themselves when at war, but once having acquired imperial rule, they come to ruin. They lose their edge like iron when they remain. They lose their edge like iron when they remain at peace. The reason is the legislature has not educated them to be capable of being at leisure. So you have to educate not only how to war, but you have to also now educate to leisure. How do you educate leisure? Educating to know how to people at leisure. The danger here is those who only educated to war. The problem is once they get power, they get they get control, and what happens is that once there is leisure and no longer war, their rule falls apart because they lose their edges. He says they come to ruin because they're used to warlikeness. Then what happens is lacking the war, lacking the harshness of war, they become soft, and their regime collapses. The reason is that the legislature has not educated them to be capable of leisure. And that's the criticism of those who praise the Spartan regime. So here we end chapter 14 on this. We're going to stop. And you have any questions, concerns, issues that you want to do? If you have themes you want to ask me to, you want to investigate, please put it here. When I see it, I'll reply to it. If you have any, if you liked it, please share it with others. Put it on social media, forward around. If you've not subscribed, subscribe. If you have subscribed, encourage others to subscribe. Now, if you didn't like it, you can thumbs down it, but say why in the comments. Another thing you can do is if you want to follow me on social media, you can follow the links below. If you want to contribute, if you want to help me do these things, you can do so by becoming a member of Patreon or subscribe. So the information is below. Another way you can help, you can always send me money, but if you don't, I hate to say that, but begging like, life is expensive these days, right? Another way you can help me is to buy my book. This is, okay, you buy my other books, but you buy this one, this 2022 book that I did. This is a notebook on Aristotle's politics. This is a not a commentary or interpretation. This is a workbook. This is basically kind of a Cliff's Notes on the politics. It help gets a good. It introduces both the. It's aimed at both introductory students and other advanced students. Different people can use this. It's an overview of the. It offers an introduction to the text and the way you can approach the text. It also deals with the from book by book, chapter by chapter. It gives summaries, outlines, structures, questions, some thematic questions, and then it deals with also it gives charts, outlines, graphs, and other things, tools by which you can kind of get a better understanding of the text. Um, it's available. It's available at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all places like this. But if you really want to help me, you buy Lulu directly. Yes, they charge you, and Amazon doesn't, may not. But if you buy by Lulu, I get the profit that Amazon and those other places would. And there was that share the bookstore share with it. Lulu will send it to me. So please consider going there and getting a copy. Wish to help me. On that note, I will let you guys go. We next time turn to chapter 15. So take care. Bye bye, and have a good day. Take care.